I'm Max Clark. This is going to be a fun one. We're going to talk about cybersecurity and the realities of implementing strong cybersecurity for your business. I was talking with a business owner because they had just had a cybersecurity incident. Fortunately for them, it's not going to be a financially impacting incident because they caught it in time and were able to unwind it. I'm not going to get into much more details than that. The question and the conversation became, what do we do to prevent this from happening again? Because now we're freaked out about it because we've had this experience. And I started explaining to him basically the approach and the layers of how you layer systems and platforms and process and people, or, people and process and tools, however you want to express it, and what the goal of those different tools are and why they're important. Now, if you haven't gone down a cybersecurity modernization, transformation, whatever you want to call it, journey, if you haven't gone down and started into the cybersecurity journey, I will tell you that the best thing that you should do is you should take a look at your insurance carrier and your cyber insurance policy, and you should start by adhering to what they want. And the reason for that is because if you don't, and you have an incident and you have a problem, and they find out that you're not doing what you've told them that you were doing because they require you to do it, you're not getting any help from your insurance company. So start there. Really, really basic stuff. Security awareness training. Listen, security awareness training is a good checkbox for you to have. It is really good to train your people. Don't spend a lot of time doing exhaustive phishing tests trying to catch Bob or Sally in accounting because they clicked on a link. Phishing is an arms race, and you're dealing with experts who have more resources than you do and more time to trick your team and your employees. You're just going to piss people off, like, to a point. Do it, do the exercises, let them see it, let them understand it. But no, security awareness training is not going to solve your security issues. But you're going to need SAT. You're going to need to have a SAT program. If nothing else, it's going to check the compliance box for you. This is, it's a bad analogy, but it's like sexual harassment training, from HR departments. Everybody has to go through it. It's important that you do it. Just because everybody checked the box and went through the sexual harassment training doesn't mean that you don't have some idiot that's going to go and sexually harass somebody else inside of the company. So security awareness training is in that same vein. The best places to start, though, is you need an endpoint detection and response system. You need EDR. Some people call it advanced antivirus. It's not advanced antivirus. It's an association wordplay just to make it so that way people understand what they're talking about. Like, oh, you had antivirus, but it's antiquated, so we've got this advanced AV tool now that you can use instead that's better, right? So it's a layperson's explanation for what it is. But you need an EDR system in play, and you need to have strong identity access management with single sign-on and multi-factor authentication. Now, multi-factor authentication can come a bunch of different ways. Nope, you probably have had an experience where you're signing into some system and you get a text message sent to you with a code on it. That is better than nothing, but in the scheme of things, it's basically hot garbage, because you're still vulnerable to SIM swapping attacks and all sorts of other phishing attacks that can happen outside of your control with your cell phone carrier. And 5 seconds on Google and you're going to, I don't have to preach to you about this, but it's better than nothing, but it's not great. From SMS authentication, you get to TOTP systems. So Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, you can put this in Authy, you can use 1Password. Basically every system is going to give you TOTP codes. And these are every 30 seconds, the code changes and rotates. And so then when you authenticate with a system, username and password goes in, and then you have to put your code in, and you have to look at the app and get the code. Cisco Duo has an interesting variation of this, which is, push notifications to the device. It says, yes, it's me, no, it's not. Very easy for a user to deal with. If you're using any of the Google Workspace or Gmail products, you're seeing them prompt you like, hey, open up your YouTube app and then click the button and verify the code, right? So these are all kind of in that same vein of creating a simpler and easier to use but stronger authentication. The next step up from all this stuff is security keys. And the most common on the market today is YubiKey. And YubiKey is a device that you either have a RFID interface, you connect to it with RFID, or you plug it into a USB port. And so when you go to authenticate and you need that special code that goes onto the website, you have to activate the key, and then the key actually prompts and puts in the code. I think what's incredible about the keys is you need to have it physically on your person. So if somebody's trying to do something and they don't physically have the physical hardware because they're physically not you, right? You can see where I'm going with this. It's hard for them to even start. The other thing about these keys is, unlike typing in copying and pasting a code out of an application into something else or from an SMS, it's really hard to phish. When we say it was really hard, it's impossible to phish these things. You can use Cyrillic characters, for instance, in the URL, and it looks like an A and it's not an A, and you're on a different website. You don't realize it. And there's a reason why your app is like, oh, it's not copying and pasting your password into it. But what happens? People just take and they just type it in themselves, and they give their credentials away to somebody. Security keys prevent that from happening because they won't match the URL and they won't enter the thing, right? Anyway, so this is kind of like do security awareness training, get an EDR, and do something about MFA, right? That's like the first 3 things. things you should do, right? Security awareness training, EDR, and MFA. And I explain all this, and we're talking about this, and the response that made me laugh was verbatim, "Oh man, that sounds like such a hassle." Yeah, sure it is. Like, it's a hassle that you have to go through security awareness training. It's a hassle that you have to like pull out your app and like get the rotating code to sign into your website. But you know what else is a hassle? Like having a couple $100,000 stolen from you out of your bank account because you didn't have one of these systems in place and then trying to get it back. Or it's a hassle being, locked out of all your systems because, somebody did something. It's a hassle losing all your data. Like it's all a hassle. Yes, it is a hassle. The point is that there's ways of doing these things that aren't a hassle, and you can make it as hassle-free as possible and actually get user adoption and use, which is good, because then you have stronger security. It's a minimal hassle, right? Like single sign-on systems, like instead of having to maintain, what's the average SaaS sprawl? Probably 100 apps inside of a company, right? Like you really, people are expected to remember 100 passwords? No, of course not. They have the same password 100 times. So what do you get out of single sign-on? You have a single platform that you have to sign into with your strong authentication MFA platform. Then that authenticates you into everything else. Is a little bit of a hassle? Sure, because you have to do it the first time, but then it's not a hassle after the time. If you're in the mentality of, look, right? Like locking the doors, your car doors or your house doors or your gate is a hassle, right? But why do you do it? You do it so that way people don't just pull on the door and just walk in. Like if your car is in a parking lot and it's unlocked, somebody is going to check the handle and probably get into the car. Is it a hassle for you to lock the car? Is it a reasonable hassle for you to have to lock the car versus what the alternative is and what the outcome is? This is probably the fundamentally frustrating thing for me when talking with companies about cybersecurity, is this idea of like ROI, like what's our return of investment of this? How do we quantify what we're getting back? Like, oh, we're creating more work for people. It's now a hassle, and like we're spending this money on it. And like, what do we actually get? Like, what is the ROI on a lock on your door? Like, did it prevent 15 thefts this year? Like, how would you know? Like, how do you actually quantify that? Of course you put a lock on your car. Why? Because if you don't, you know what the outcome is. And I feel like we're still in this inflection. We're not at the inflection point yet. We're still like building up the hill before we like jump off the cliff of just understanding that there's basic things. It's just a cost of having an IT platform at this point is that you have to have a reasonable level of security attached to it. So my argument here, and what I'm advocating for, isn't about creating hassle for you and your team. We're trying to do this with the least amount of hassle as possible. That's the goal. The goal is we want you to use it. A cybersecurity practitioner wants you to use these systems because they want to improve the security of your business. They want to tighten the security of your platforms. They want to prevent bad things from happening to you. That's the goal. The goal is to prevent bad things from happening to you. And we all know that in order to do that, it has to be used, which means it has to be low hassle as possible. So if you're thinking about this from the standpoint of like, oh, that's a hassle and it's a drag, and oh man, I really, like you're just going to have a bad time. It's just a matter of time. And if you still think that you're not a target, it's not about targeting you directly. It doesn't matter. Like, you're connected to the internet. You're going to be scanned and hit. You're going to have an email. Somebody's going to send you a thing. Like, you're in a list. It is a matter of time before somebody tests your door handle. And if they jiggle the door handle and nothing happens, the majority of them are just going to walk away. When I say the majority, I mean like 99.999, some infinity number are just going to walk away because you've just created a hassle for them, right? So don't look at it as a hassle for you. Look at it as a hassle for the people that you want to keep out of your car, right? Like, oh man, such a drag. This door is locked. Okay, I'll just go to the next one. Oh, that one's unlocked. Boom, I'm in. That's the way you think about this stuff. That's what you're really trying to build here. Are you making it reasonably difficult for somebody to do something bad to you? Because then it's a hassle for them and they just move on. Now, if you're a bank, if you've got money, like when I say money, I'm not talking about like your normal operating cash flow. If you're maintaining money for other people, right? If you're a defense contractor and you have to have ITAR compliance, if you have intellectual property that matters to you, because of espionage or market competition, like ratchet up your security infrastructure accordingly, right? But if you're not, and by the way, like what's an example? You're an accountant, you're a lawyer, like, oh, you don't have the money for your clients, but what do have? You have confidential stuff that if it got out would be really bad, right? Like if your customers' tax returns and work papers got leaked out, like could that do damage? And what would happen? If you're a lawyer and you're working on a case and your stuff got out, what would happen? There's lots of layers and there are stuff, that's valuable and critical that you need to protect. And if you're just getting started with this, again, like instead of thinking about it like it's a hassle for you, all you're trying to do is you're trying to make it a hassle for somebody else. You can absolutely do that. It's not that hard to do. You just have to spend a little bit of energy and a little bit of money and you're there. And you will avoid the stupid stuff, like just the person walking down the row of cars in the parking lot and jiggling door handles. You'll avoid. I'm Max Clark. I hope this helps you. If you have questions or corrections, because, we love arguing on the internet, comment below and we'll get back to you.
Feel it.